There have been rumors of Microsoft working on some secret Xbox handheld with Asus, and it's actually the first handheld ever to carry the Xbox branding. And this is unlike any Windows handheld that has come before it. So this is the ROG XBOX Ally and Ally X. And on these devices, the Xbox team worked with Asus to tune the operating system. We've never seen that kind of control before, where the device doesn't even boot into a typical Windows desktop environment. It loads into a full screen Xbox UI. And in the background, there's no Windows desktop, there's no desktop icons, there's no taskbar. All of the non-essential tasks aren't even loaded. It's just the most bare minimum initialization to be able to get games running. And the result is a significant reduction in background load. So Microsoft claims that they have a reduced memory requirement of 2 gigs that can be allocated to games instead. And all like the CPU cycles that are spent keeping those processes active, like it's so wasteful the way that Windows typically loads. And also with these optimizations, they're claiming that the standby state is 3 times as energy efficient as a typical Windows boot. So in comparison to a regular Windows boot up, this new optimized version without all the bloat loaded up front uses 1/3 the energy in standby compared to regular, which is crazy. When I heard that number, I was like, this is why Windows is so bad for handheld games. So it should be pretty clear, this isn't just a new handheld with a fancy launcher. They've gone into the operating system to shape it so it feels and performs more like a typical console. Now, the timing of this announcement feels a little, it's too convenient because this is coming off the tail of the Switch 2 sales launch and also like the public launch of SteamOS. I think at this point Microsoft understands the pressure that the gamers are putting on them to put out something that isn't awful, and I think this has a lot of potential. Now, at the Xbox event, I was able to check out the UI and get a feel for the gameplay, but we were not allowed to record any of that stuff. Understandably so, because it's so early on in the development cycle, but they did supply us with some pictures, so with some video editing, I can give you a rough demo of what it looked like. The interface was really smooth, almost too smooth. Like it almost felt like it could just be like a sandbox demo of just icons and UI elements. Like it wasn't actually functional. It seemed like it was. I was clicking around and doing things and it was like reacting to it, but it just felt strangely smooth for a Windows device. The Xbox button brings you to the interface home, and you can also switch between apps. Like you can be in a game and then swap out to a different launcher or switch to Discord. Basically, you can do the equivalent of alt-tabbing between apps. You retain that functionality. The centerpiece of the UI, though, is their new gaming library, which gives you access to all of the games that you can run on Windows. So like Xbox, Game Pass, Battle.net, Steam, basically all of the major game libraries out there. They didn't specifically say Steam, but they implied it. And all of these games would appear in a list, and there's a little icon that indicates which game library it came from, and it'll also sync the save state for Xbox Play Anywhere titles. But because this is so early on in the development, I had a lot of questions for them, and they didn't have a lot of definitive answers. I asked them, like, let's say you do want to go into desktop mode for whatever reason. You want to, install an update, or you want to install a program. You have to go into the Windows desktop. So let's say you do all that stuff and then you leave desktop mode to go back into your games. I asked them, does it all uninstall out? And they didn't have an answer for that. And also, I asked them about like the sleep-wake functionality and the resume, because this is a very big weakness when it comes to Windows handhelds. It's a high priority for them and they're working on it, but they didn't have any definitive answers for like numbers or any kind of factual information. There were indications that Microsoft was planning on extending this modified OS beyond just the ROG Xbox Ally systems, right? It seemed like they were trying to go for a bigger audience at some point, like more device support and things like that. All of this was like, we might be. There was never any kind of definitive answers. But the one thing that they did indicate with certainty was that they are working to at least identify the games out there that work well with these systems and work well with the ecosystem, as well as potentially working with developers to tune and just optimize games for this ecosystem. All right, let's talk about the hardware. So there's 2 models. There's an ROG XBOX Ally, the white one, and an ROG XBOX Ally X, the black one. The X variant is the more powerful one. It's running the Ryzen Z2 Extreme chip, and this one's aimed at 900 to 1080p gaming. The white one, the regular Ally, has the less powerful but more budget-friendly Z2A chip, and this is aimed at 720p gaming. Now, in terms of relative performance, the Z2 Extreme rumors estimate to be like 10, maybe 15% faster than a Z1 Extreme. The Z2A chip, though, is noticeably slower. It's rumored to be very similar to the Aerith chip that we saw on the Steam Deck, and that's like a 3 or 4 year old chip at this point. But Microsoft did say that they worked with AMD to optimize that chip in that 15 to 20 watt range to get better performance, but it is positioned as the entry point to this product stack. So the regular ROG XBOX Ally, the white one, has less RAM, slower RAM, a smaller battery, and the USB-C ports are both USB 3.2. There's no USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4 connectivity for the white one, only the black X model has it. Also, the X model has impulse triggers up top, which are basically like haptics for the triggers. Both of these devices have the same screen. They share the same 1080p panel, which is actually the same screen that was used on the original ROG Ally. It's a good screen, but it's starting to show its age. The external dimensions are identical between them, but the white one is lighter. I'm assuming it's lighter because it's got a smaller battery and maybe the thermal system doesn't have to be as chonky because it's not as hot of a chip, but it isn't thinner. These are both very thick devices, thicker than basically every other modern handheld. Now, a big thank you to Linus, who brought a huge stash of handhelds to be able to compare the sizes and dimensions of. So without him, I wouldn't be able to show you this, but that ROG XBOX Ally is thick. Now the more powerful one, the X variant, or the black one, is 715 grams. It's heavier than the previous generation Ally X, but it doesn't feel super heavy when you're playing on it. The weight seems to be nicely distributed because of the grips. So we gotta talk about these grips. When I first saw leaked photos of this thing, I thought it looked super ugly because of those grips, but having spent a little bit of time with the real device, it's definitely grown on me. I think a lot of it has to do with like the matte finish instead, like it just looks a lot better with the matte finish. Also, there's like a micro texture of like text that reads ROG and Xbox on it. I think it looks pretty cool. But in terms of the ergonomics, I thought it would feel awesome because they're basing it off of a controller, but it's not what I expected. So it doesn't feel like an Xbox controller. It feels like a controller, but if you compare the way that they flare out and just the general shape, they are not all that similar. The steeper angle on the Xbox controller makes sense because that's just how your hands come together when you are playing on a controller like that. And then it's like a wider stance and kind of like a straighter angle when you're playing on a handheld. But it's just, if you're expecting them to feel similar because of the Xbox branding, I don't think they do. If anything, I'd argue that the Steam Deck still feels the most comfortable to me. It is a lighter device, so the ergonomics feel and balance differently, but that feels like a 9 out of 10 for comfort to me. The ROG Xbox Allies, those feel like maybe 8. And then the previous Ally X, so the previous gen, this thing feels like, I'd say 7.5. And then the one before that, like the first Ally, was probably like a 6.5. Now, comfort is very subjective, and the weight of these devices has a big impact on how they feel in hand, but I thought I'd go through this because I think for a lot of people looking at this like weird grip shape on the side, they're just curious about it, and I thought I'd share some experiences. One last thought. The battery on the ROG Ally X is the previous generation. This ran across the whole thing, right? It's like a rectangular shaped battery that fits very nicely and snugly in a fairly rectangular shaped case. On the new one, because of those grips, it's not as space efficient. Like you can't stick batteries into those side things. I mean, you could, but I don't think they are. And so you just have, I'm sure there's haptics and stuff in there, but it's just less space efficient when you have the grips. I'm just saying. It's another negative to having grips like that. Okay, very cool device in terms of the software. I think the idea of it is amazing, and I also think the ability for the technology, like the OS technology, to trickle out to more devices and configurations, I think it would change the gaming world for the better. And isn't that something we all want, to just have cleaner and leaner operating systems for our devices? I hope Microsoft does it.